So we're pretty much done. We just need to render it now. By render, I mean set up materials and lighting and the actual rendering. Fortunately, none of those things will be that hard. So coming back out here, I'm going to say turn off the preview one here. Actually, come back into the output, copy the out high res, make a geometry node, so I'm going to call render building. Make it red, because I like to. And all these RNDR underscore nodes are going to be what I actually end up rendering. And the only thing that needs to be in here is us importing those high-res pieces. So let that sit for a second so we can confirm. I mean, it should be fine. But there you go. We've got the nice curvier high-res stuff going on here. Very good. They also have V velocity attributes here, which means that we can do motion blur. So go to render, sampling, velocity blur, and once we render it, that'll happen. Let's also make a ground plane. Now, if you were gonna composite your effect onto something else, we wouldn't need a ground plane necessarily. Maybe a ground plane to block light, but in our case, we're gonna render a ground plane because we're not gonna do any compositing. It's outside the scope of this lesson. So let's just go in here, drop a grid on the ground, and just make it big. So I'm gonna make it 1,000 by 1,000. I just want it to be the ground that the pieces are falling onto, in essence. So good enough. I'm also gonna turn these off. So we made our nodes. Let's make some materials. If we go to the material palette, we need to, well actually I'll turn the preview one back on. We need to shop for some materials. For one, we need a principled shader to represent this dark gray concrete exterior. We need a material to represent the light gray concrete exterior. We need another shader to represent the interior. Remember that inside outside stuff we did before? Or these interior faces will have kind of a lighter concrete because they haven't been painted or been exposed to the air or whatever. Another principled shader for the ground. And then finally glass for our window. Now we made the materials here in the material palette. We could have made at least some of these over here in the matte area. You can see that's where they get put anyway. Press L to organize it. I can press tab in here and type principled shader as well and just make them. It looks longer here, but it's really just the same thing. Just some of these parameters are hidden. But in any case, things like glass have default settings and things that it's nice to just shop for those instead of having to set them ourselves. Now, we do need to set up these materials a decent amount. For one, we don't want to use any incoming point color from what we set up in here. Like when we made this blue, we made that gray. Turn that off just to make sure we don't get it. I also don't know what the color should be yet necessarily, but we definitely don't want them to be reflective, so turn that off too. Finally, let's name them. Again, we need a concrete exterior dark for the dark, a concrete exterior light, a concrete interior, that'll be the very light one, and the ground. Now we'll adjust these colors for real once we have an interactive render going. But for now, let's give these crazy colors just to make sure that stuff is working. So I'm going to say the concrete exterior dark is going to be this purple. And the exterior light is going to be this green. And the interior here is going to be orange. So all the secondary colors. And the ground, again, remains to be seen. So we have our materials, now to assign them. If we had one material for the entire building, we could put it here. But as I said, we need to assign these materials per stuff. So if you recall, that was back in our fractures area. We had cached the pieces out to disk, and then we loaded them back in so we could do some last minute changes to them. So here's our material one. Looks like I had actually already started to do this on a previous take of this chapter. So let's just start over again and do it right this time. Believe it or not, I do re-record these things sometimes when they don't go right the first time. In any case, so here's our material. It might actually be easier at any rate to take our RBD exploded view and open it up so we can see it. Now the material has an inside and an outside. It was the outside of this general wall that we wanted to have an exterior light material. And the inside we wanted to have a concrete interior. So that's pretty much it. Once we pack it, unfortunately, we don't see it anymore because that material, this material attribute that Houdini recognizes, that the viewport specifically recognizes, it was exposed here, but once it's packed, it's inside and it can't see it anymore, which is a little silly, but that's just the way it goes. The render can be made to see it, but the viewport is not going to see it. So what I'm going to do is say copy that, so we know a few things are going to have that same setup. The wall big and the wall small will both have that setup. So just paste it in for the wall small, and if we want to see it, we can say it's the same thing. The wall front is going to be the same thing, so just delete it, bring it in, and look. There you go. Now the concrete column is going to be a little different. So this still has the things on here, so just pretend they weren't there. So I'm not starting this chapter over just for that. So anyway, so here's our column. Now this time, the exterior is going to be the exterior dark, and the interior is going to be the same interior as the other ones. So I'm going to copy this one because he shares his colors with the floor. There you go. And if you want to prove it to yourself once more, there you go. Awesome. And the glass, as you can imagine, we'll just get the glass one. And as you can see, I already did it. Make sure that you don't have the interior, exterior stuff here. Just have one of these tabs with no group pointing to the glass. And there you go. Even looks a little glassy here in the viewport. And that's it. So although we don't get to enjoy seeing them like that here in the viewport, those materials are assigned. They're assigned anyway on the high-res track. So they've carried all the way on down to here, to the high-res building. And again, although we don't see it because it's inside the packed, if we were to unpack this, which might take a little while, then we would see it. But it doesn't really matter because we're about to see it in the actual render anyway. Oh, and actually while we're here, let's assign the material for the ground as well onto the ground here. Cool.